Today I've got a really exciting video for you guys. I have actually been trying to prepare this for days, failing significantly at it, but because it kind of required me to come up with an interesting character and an interesting storyline for that character. But I finally did it last night. It kind of came to me, and yeah, now I'm doing the video. I'm very excited for this. So I wanted to share my process of coming up with characters with you guys, and also give you a free template so you can do this process yourself as well if you wanted to. I think the reason that I really struggled with actually finishing this video and finishing this template for you guys was because I kept sort of asking myself, like, what else can I add to this? What else can I put in this character sheet, in this character template, for it to be useful for you guys and for it to kind of make a difference? And originally I was going to name this video and this template the ultimate character template. Then I took a step back and I was like, why are you making this harder than it needs to be? Like, I re-examined all of my characters that I created over the past however many years, and I did used to have an obsession with like creating really detailed character sheets and figuring out absolutely everything about that character. But I did notice that most of the books and the projects that I've actually finished and whose characters I actually adore are those who do not have character sheets. Like, they're literally those characters that I just sat down and I brainstormed something about them. I brainstormed their backstory, or like what I wanted them to be in the project, how I wanted them to change, how I wanted them to grow throughout it. And those were definitely the types of characters that then actually took off and became something. The other ones whom I did like a massive character sheet for, it never actually like came to fruition. These were projects that I often abandoned, and then I didn't. I just wasn't interested in them because I never dove in deeply with those characters. I just followed like surface traits and lists and personalities and quirks and things like that. And yeah, so I told myself, you know what? Just make it easy. It's an easy template. That's kind of the point of this. Why should it be complicated when it's not complicated? Why should I create a template with like endless questionnaires and endless things that are going to distract you from actually creating an interesting character? So I decided not to do that. I decided to follow my gut and just give you the literal bare bones of what you need to make a really good, compelling character that's not going to make your brain burst. All you need is the actual meat and the juicy parts of what makes that character who they are. So, without me blabbering onwards, let's just dive straight into it. Alright, we're gonna jump into the template. As you can see, we have a really nice banner design by my graphic designer and editor, Barry. Shout out to you. I've also started inputting a little bit about our character that we're gonna be working on today that I'm gonna show you this template on. I just put a little bit of basic information in about her, but we'll go through the rest of the stuff together. But this is basically what we're gonna be working with. So we'll have an about section with her name, age, sign, standout quirks, her voice, and I just have a little sort of aesthetic place here for a quote. I love to think about like quotes that fit my characters and things like that. I usually always have like one or two main ones that really make me think of that character. And then we're going to move on to the meaty part, which is the internal conflict, or the purpose towards the theme of who your character is. So I wrote down a couple of questions for each of these just to sort of help you kind of orient yourself and understanding what you're actually supposed to be thinking about in this particular spot. So we have, what is this character's misguided mindset, or like their misbelief, or something they believe that isn't actually true? What issues do they carry with them that need to be challenged throughout the story? And how does this exemplify the theme of the story that I want to explore? So I'm a big believer in the fact that whatever you choose to be your protagonist's journey arc throughout the story should also be the main topic and the main lesson of your book, so the main theme underlying that story. So I will show you what I mean by this when we create Beatrice. The next category is the character arc. So this is their journey of change throughout the actual novel that you are writing. So we're going to be asking, what kind of challenges do they have to face in order to overcome their mindset, or their whatever their issue is to begin with? Are they actually going to overcome the issue, or will you have a tragic end? That's up to you. What is the external goal that this character is trying to achieve, and how does their internal conflict make this a little bit more difficult for them. Well, probably a lot more difficult for them. That's kind of the point of storytelling, right? And finally, we arrive at the last category, and that is the backstory. Why are we making any of the choices about the story that we are making? Why is our protagonist the way that they are? So how did this character's mindset or misbelief come to be, and why? Was there a big event in their past that influences their misbelief? And how did their backstory shape their personality? This one's really important because a lot of the times I see authors they know who their characters actually are, but they don't know why their characters are the way that they are, which is why backstory is super important. And of course, lastly, how does it actually influence their decisions for the future or the current events of the novel that you're writing? And the last section that we have is the important relationships. So I usually like to have an overview for this, at least for my protagonists, so that I know who they're interacting with and how does that influence their journey through the novel. But yeah, overall, this is a pretty easy template. There's not a whole lot here that you have to kind of fill out. It is mostly focused on the meat of the story and the meat of who your character is, and that's kind of the point of it. I don't want to throw overwhelming character questionnaires because I actually, for one, don't believe in character questionnaires. I think it's more about having questions that are suited for your character, not just a random list of questions that you found online. You have to be asking these questions with purpose, and you have to be asking them specifically for your character, because an online questionnaire cannot presume what your character is and what kind of questions they need to be asked. That kind of has to come from you or somebody else that you might be brainstorming the project with. Okay, so let's jump in, and we'll start by filling out her basic information. So we've got her name, Beatrice Dawn. I know, it's a little bit on the nose. I was kind of feeling inspired by the template aesthetic that we were going for, like very yellowy, summery vibes. Her age is 27, and I think we are also going to have an important backstory moment at 17. So I will also just say backstory timeline 17. Her sign, I usually go for horoscope signs, but you can use your MBTIs or any kind of character archetypes that you are comfortable with here to sort of base your character off of it. But yeah, for me, it's horoscope. I know that the best, and so I feel most comfortable working with that. And we're going to go for a Virgo for her. Standout quirks and voice is actually not something that I filled in, and it is not something that I would typically fill in before I actually start writing the project. For me, the voice and the quirks kind of have to develop naturally when I'm writing that character. For example, in quirks, you could put stuff like, I don't know, she brushes her hair off of her shoulder all the time, or like she chews on her lip, or she clenches her fists, or whatever. But for me, it's like those kind of quirks don't really make sense, and they're not really relevant unless I know how they developed and I know why she's doing that. Like, for example, if she is clenching her fists, is it because of repressed anger issues? And did she start doing that because of the big event in her backstory or something like that? So I am going to leave this up to you, but that's basically what this spot is for. I personally would not fill it out at this point. I would maybe get some ideas going based on like who I envision the character to be, but this early on, I would not be filling this out. As for the voice, I think that's kind of the same thing for me. Like for the voice, we could do something like, I would probably start with like, she's not going to talk more than she ever needs to. So this would be a good sort of starting point for me personally, of knowing kind of like how to start shaping that character's voice. Because I think for me, stuff like vocabulary and tone and maybe repeated sentences and things like that, that would really just start to come to me as I'm actually writing the story and I'm actually trying on this character and trying on her voice and trying on what she looks and feels and sounds like. So yeah, this is enough for me, to be honest, to start with this character and to start writing her. Obviously, I need all the meaty parts. I need all the meaty parts first, but all the basics, I think, for me, they kind of click into place later, and this is why I don't really have massive character sheets that, like, list all of their traits and quirks and personality things and whatnot, because, yeah, that develops sort of as I write the manuscript. Okay, we're gonna move on to the first meaty, juicy part of your character. I feel like I have to stop saying that or I'm gonna freak some people out. The internal conflict. So this is your purpose of the character's existence in your novel, and usually it does point towards the larger theme of your novel. And so the idea that I had for this is kind of thinking about fate and destiny and whether we can make our own choices and come to our own personal freedom. So I'm going to go into this and I'm going to explore that a little bit deeper and we'll see what I come up with. All right, let's read through it. Here's the thing about Beatrice. She knows a lot more than she lets on. She can see into the future. Unfortunately, Bee believes her power is a curse rather than a gift. Something inherently dangerous that causes harm no matter what she does. She's haunted by guilt, convinced that her visions are unchangeable and that trying to alter the future is futile or even dangerous. These days, she refuses to use the power and is somewhat successful at keeping it at bay. But she can feel it bubbling up under her skin, ready to burst out and overwhelm her any day now. Such a power does not like not being used. Bee thinks she has to stay out of people's lives and live a solitary existence to keep those visions at bay and not to make the future any worse than it is. She cannot change the future. No one should change the future. It's written in the stars, it's destiny, it's fate, and Bee is an abomination that shouldn't exist. We'll connect this to the book's theme of personal freedom and understanding that it's one's choices that shape their future, not their destiny. Now we'll move on to her actual arc throughout this story and what I want to see kind of happen, see kind of change inside of her. How do we go from this starting point of her misbelief, of her feeling like she is something less than and like she has to hide, to her actually changing and accepting who she is and accepting that maybe she is not an abomination. As the inciting incident, Beatrice reaches a point where the power inside her overwhelms her after being suppressed for so long, and one of the other town witches notices. The witch, Theodora, gets close to Beatrice and reveals the secret coven in the new town that Beatrice moved to. They're dealing with an approaching danger, and Bee's power could help them immensely, if only she could master it. But the bigger issue is, Bee doesn't want this power, and she certainly doesn't want to get entangled in a coven of witches who did nothing to deserve her curse standing in their way. But the way Theodora looks at her with eyes so blue they look purple in the right light, Beatrice struggles to say no to anything the enticing witch says. Her words are inspiring, so much so that Bee begins to have hope she could actually fit in somewhere and end this lonely existence that's followed her, correction that she chose, over the past 10 years. Theodora makes her believe that she might genuinely hold the power to shape her own future. Beatrice needs to confront the trauma of her past and the misbelief that her power is purely destructive. She must come to understand that even though her visions are powerful, they don't have to define her actions or determine her destiny. She must learn to trust herself and others, understand she doesn't have to carry the burden alone, and that by working with Theodora and the coven, she might be able to prevent the very tragedies she fears. Okay, so we have a very simple character arc throughout the story, and this is something that will usually help you actually plot the novel and what happens in it. All right, we'll move on to the backstory, or the why, the reasoning that she is the way that she is. All right, let's jump into this one. Beatrice spent a decade running from her past, avoiding situations where her abilities could manifest. She moved to a new town to escape the memories and the guilt, determined to live a normal life as isolated as possible in a house on the outskirts of a small town she only visits for supplies, so she doesn't have to face the burden of knowing what is to come, especially in other people's lives. She stays out of them. However, this suppression comes at a cost. Her power grows stronger the more she tries to bury it, leading to overwhelming visions that she can no longer control. This power manifested in her early teens, and during that time, she had a vision of a tragic event involving her mother. In a desperate attempt to prevent the vision from coming true, Beatrice tried to interfere, only for her actions to inadvertently cause the tragedy that she foresaw. Her mother always believed magic to be a sin and a curse, and this event affirms Bee's insecurities. Now, I do want to jump a little bit deeper into that backstory with her mother. So we're going to use her important relationships in order to do that. We'll put her important relationship 1 as the one with Bee's mother. And the second one that I will work out on this video is going to be Theodora. She's the only other character that's sort of propped up for me when I was thinking about this. And yeah, they both it's kind of funny, like they both almost mirror each other. So we have Bee's mom representing the backstory, the back end of that character's journey, and then we have Theodora kind of representing the present or her future almost to what actually could be later on. All right, let's read a little bit more on Bee's mother. Bee's mother was a normal human, but her dad was a warlock, which her mother found out too late. Her mother was superstitious over these things and took Beatrice away from her father, condemning him for his magic, so Bee never met him. Her mother believed it was something sinful, a curse, and prayed for Bee to turn out normal. So, when Bee started to experience her powers, she kept it secret from her mother, and when the vision of her mother's death struck her, Bee got involved but couldn't save her. It actually seemed to be that she herself that she herself was the cause, and this affirmed her fears. She truly is a curse and an abomination, which is sad. But we love a good tragic backstory for our characters. All right, and now I've worked out a little bit more about Theodora and what their relationship might look like, and what, more importantly, I think when you are doing these relationships, especially when they are so important to the character's backstory and current story, try to ask yourself, how does it influence the protagonist, and how does it influence the theme, the project's purpose? Like, how are these characters actually contributing to that idea of like what your protagonist needs to learn or overcome? So let's read through Theodora. Theodora would help Bee question the beliefs her mother instilled in her. Thea was a healer and a safe space in her community, a confident and compassionate witch who has fully embraced her own powers. By showing Bee that magic is not inherently evil, Theodora would help her start to see the abilities in a new light. As Theodora and Bee spend more time together, their relationship deepens. Theodora's affection provides a nice counterbalance to the fear and the guilt that have been dominating Bee's life. Bee begins to see herself not just through the lens of her trauma, but through Theodora's eyes, someone strong, valuable, and worthy of love. Eventually, Theodora could help Bee revisit the events of her mother's death to see what truly happened. This would be a pivotal moment in Bee's arc, where she realizes that her mother's death was not her fault, and she is not a curse. Now, of course, we don't have all the details. This is something that I would have to actually sit down and plot out, but I'm quite happy with the bones of this project. So happy, in fact, that I'm almost inspired to write. I've never actually written anything this sort of fantasy driven, but I thought it might be fun to think about a character like this and what their journey could look like. So yeah, I hope you liked this. Alright, so we have finished Beatrice's little character arc, and I'm very happy with how that turned out, and I hope you guys learned something from it. Obviously, if you want to download this Notion template for yourself and test it out, you can do so by following the link in the description, and there should be some instructions on how you can install it on your Notion account. You have to actually create the Notion account first, and then you can import this into your workspace. The designs that we put on it should still remain in the template, so you are welcome to keep them, or you can also obviously replace them with your own character images and your own banners and your own colors, depending on what sort of inspires you for the project. All of that is customizable and changeable for you. But yeah, that brings us to the end of this video, and if you are interested in learning how to also set up your manuscript in Google Docs in a really aesthetic and inspiring way for you to write, I also have a video on that, which will come up on the screen shortly, and I will see you there. Bye!